Hi there, I'm Timothy Linsdau. I'm a video producer and a Christian. Today I'm again putting on my science hat in the often painful and rowdy discussion of origins. Okay, what is this painful and rowdy discussion all about? Trying to understand where did it all come from? And of course, the ultimate question would be, why did it come from anything? Well, I like to ask some questions about it all. I mean, we hear arguments from both sides. Many times these arguments are based on money, support. But one of the recent studies that I read about is one by a Dr. Richard Linsdau. He did a famous E. coli breeding experiment at the University of Chicago. And in this experiment, they let develop over time 50,000 generations breeding E. coli. Now, the idea was, of course, to see if there was some type of evolution occurring in this bacteria as each generation came into being, if you will. Mutations did cause a loss of regulation in the in the E. coli, which, because they were feeding them citrate, and they don't function well with that diet. So what they did discover is that the E. coli actually, it caused a loss of regulation, so that they didn't block that, they actually let it into their bodies, if you will. And that change, where they started to thrive on something they normally couldn't thrive on before, was argued as a proof for seeing evolution. So the question has to be asked, if no new functions evolve after 50,000 bacterial generations, is there any reason to think they would ever evolve from this bacteria to another kind of cell? I guess an example would be flu virus mutations also are argued to prove evolution. But why are we still fighting flu viruses? The same with the E. coli, even though they came up with a way to consume this citrate diet, they still remain E. coli. They're not a different animal, if you will. Just asking questions here. Natural selection gives creatures an appearance of design. I've heard that one before. Because evolution uses an argument for natural selection through environmental pressures that help develop various creatures. And one example is bird feathers. The evolution argument has been that air pressure helped make bird feathers air resistant. Okay. But I guess one might ask the question, if it gave these animals bird feathers, why don't more animals have feathers? Isn't that a question? Nobody's actually seen nature's selection crafting new designs, as in a new species. Why does that not happen? Why don't we see that anywhere? With the thing with origins is that how do we start from a cell and get to man? So we have to have transitions. In science, we have to have evidence, repeatable evidence. We have to have evidence for science to be of any benefit to us. Otherwise, it's just conjecture or a belief. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. But we need evidence. That's what we need to see. And have we seen that? Another example, and I've talked about this a little while back, whale fossils show evolution, which would have to be a transition somewhere. They discovered a whale ancestor in the 80s, well, at least a skull, and they hadn't discovered the full body. Recently, they have discovered larger fossils to make that connection that it was a whale. But some speculate the hip bones in a whale are useless leftovers. But apparently the new science or research shows they aren't hip bones. They're bones used that are vital to underwater mating for whales. So apparently the connection with hip bones in whales being a leftover from the previous land animal is not a good argument anymore. Now, more on the whale. Let's ask some more questions here. Is a whale a whale? Has it always been a whale? Again, we need transitions to show us this. Now, the hip bones idea seems to have faded away, and so I get the question I ask in the story of evolution that I've seen, that most things, that the cell develops inside some liquid form, water, we're assuming, slowly develops into an animal, into a fish, and then eventually crawls up on land. That's a very traditional picture of what you would see for evolution. The question I have is the thing with the whale goes the other direction. It goes from what I would say a complicated land animal to a less complicated creature in the ocean. So again, we have that brings up a question: why are we going seemingly backwards? Now, another one is ape men prove evolution, if you will, human evolution, sorry. And that's another argument with very commonly known one, of course, is the discovery of what they call Lucy in Africa being a human ancestor. Now, that's been argued as to who is what and when. Apparently, museum displays show Lucy with human feet, but there's not any real evidence for it. The layout of what I've seen for Lucy is a very small amount of bones. And the one I've seen doesn't show feet, so the museum is assuming that. There is some disagreement on that based on other fossils they believe were early man, where the feet show ape-like structure. I guess, can one name a particular fossil that evolutionary experts all agree was an ape transitioning into a human? If human evolution were true, why would natural processes give uniquely human traits such as an abstract thought, appreciation of beauty, knowledge of right and wrong, and but not to animals? And that's an argument from the other side. So that goes on with is it an extinct ape, or is it a transitional fossil to man? And that argument goes on. Excuse me here, I got a dry throat. But there's been another good one lately, and that's the humans and chimps share a 98% genetic identity. I've been reading some on that, and apparently, if you put side by side DNA sequences, comparisons show more than 85% similarity if you line up the entire DNA. The argument is that they're only using parts of the DNA that would match up to human DNA, not the entire code. So a question would be, is the percent differences between the chimp and human genome simply based on the size of the DNA? As chimpanzees apparently have about 6% more DNA. That's something I've read. The argument here is that it's not 98, but it's 85% when you take a closer look at the entire DNA strand of each. That's their argument. So is this argument of origins based on reality, based on science? It takes just one thought-provoking question to get us thinking: which is true? The better we understand what makes understand origins, the better we are off to answer these questions of where did everything come from, how could it be, and then of course the final question of why does any of this exist? But that's the big question of everything. So again, I'm asking questions about origins. Hear the rhetoric from both sides. The real difficulty I see is evidence. In science, you have to have evidence. You have to have something repeatable. And we don't have it in the fossil record. It has to be a lot of changes to get from one species to the next. Wouldn't that be logical? And we're not seeing that. And that's what, looking at this from a science perspective, that's what you have to find. You have to be able to see that evidence. So far, I don't see it. Well, this excuse me there, this rather painful and rowdy argument continues on origins, and maybe it always will. I'm Timothy Linsdau. Like and comment on my videos, subscribe to my channel. Have a great day.